This is Stigma, where we talk with leaders from many industries about how mental health and addiction have impacted their lives. Many people suffer silently from mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma. They never seek help because of stigma. In this podcast, host Stephen Hayes and his guests share their stories of recovery in order to encourage others to do the same. Here's Stephen.
Welcome back to another episode of the Stigma Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Hayes, and today I'm having a conversation with a founder, Aimee-Louisse Carton, founder of KeepAppy, about discrimination in the mental health space, especially in the startup ecosystem. Discrimination against people who have a mental health difference, people like her who've been called names for their past struggles with mental health differences, and by founders and by investors nonetheless. So we're going to dig into that. Her story is really powerful, and I hope that it's a change agent to change the way we're talking about mental health and stigma, especially in the startup ecosystem. So without further ado, I want to get right into it. Aimee, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. I am so pumped to be here today as well. And I absolutely am so passionate about this conversation. So I can't wait to get started.
So can you give our audience a little bit of bio background on you and what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. You can probably tell my accent I'm not American, even though I spend too much time with my co-founder who is American. So I've adopted it a little bit. But I'm originally actually from Ireland, from Dublin. And my story into this world of mental health actually came kind of when I was a little bit older, when I was 22. Even though I had been showing signs of mental illness from a very young age, I was in complete denial, as so many people are, about this issue. Because in my mind, if I wasn't wearing a straitjacket and in an asylum, which is how I perceived mental illness to be, I didn't need help. I was fine. I was strong. I was a powerful person and I could do everything. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case, because in late 2017, I made an attempt on my life. And it was a very dark time. I had to take a huge amount of time off work. And as someone who's super driven and energetic and passionate about what I do, that was a really tough time, even in and of itself. And it was kind of a moment in my life where physical health, mental illness, physical illness really collided, and everything just seemed to fall apart for me. It was in the depths of that I, like most people, suffering from an illness, wanted that silver bullet. I wanted a magic pill that would make me instantly better, where I'd be normal again, or what I perceived to be normal, and I'd be cured. And that didn't happen. And my recovery just kept going on, and I kept trying to speed it up. And that was probably the first time I started getting spammed on social media, on Google, on all the platforms with meditation apps. And I straight away bring it to my doctors, and then I was so excited. I was like, I'm going to cure myself. I actually, I can do this quicker than you're telling me. And that was the first time I was told that I wasn't a suitable candidate for meditation, that the meditation apps wouldn't actually be good for me. They'd actually negatively impact me as a result of my anxiety, my PTSD, and my borderline personality disorder. So I was like turning my head, because this is all I knew. Meditation was all I knew as a good thing for mental health. And that started me on a journey learning about proactive and positive techniques for mental health, and kind of more about taking control of your mental health from a preventative way, instead of just reacting to mental health crisis or mental crisis. So everything from journaling to goal setting, and that really launched me onto the journey of KeepAppy. So myself and my co-founder, we set up the app just over a year and a half ago. This is actually the 1-year anniversary of its launch. So we're very excited today.
Happy birthday.
Yes, exactly. It's a big day for us. And we've reached over 100 countries and empowered over 25,000 people with very little marketing. And it's been such a powerful journey and a personal journey for me, because it all started with one night on a bridge in a really stormy weather. And now my pain is being used and my recovery is being used to help people all over the world. So it's a really cool experience.
That's such a powerful story. That gives me goosebumps. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
That was a little. Gave you the good points. You missed a lot of me like crying or like being sad and alone in bed. But no, it's been a great journey, and I'm so glad I was saved that day. So yeah.
I think that those of us who've lived through something similar, I think we know the dark places. Like we've all been there too. So I don't think you have to highlight those. I think the powerful thing that you're doing is that you're sharing the positive story and you're trying to help other people, and that is going to save lives. It's also going to reduce stigma, and I think it's going to drive us towards this societal change that we need, where we give people who've lived through these difficulties, these mental health differences, we give them a chance to get well and do things differently.
100%. Yeah.
So in your process of building a company, you've gone out and you've talked to investors, and you had mentioned that you'd seen some pretty discriminatory feedback about you and the way some investors had referred to you along the way because of your mental health past. What can you tell us about that?
I think that was a very polite way, a very politically correct way to describe what happened. So yeah, unfortunately, the Irish startup ecosystem is very small, and the investors ecosystem is even smaller. And unfortunately, one of the really influential investors here in Ireland, he basically, what happened was, it was after a meet and match breakfast where you met with numerous investors in all those different situations. And afterwards, in the co-gendered toilets, he cornered me and said that mental health was just a fad, that I would be forever known as that suicide girl, and no one would invest in me because they wouldn't trust me. And I wish I had some really cool, flashy comeback. I wish I had some amazing follow up after that to be, impressive. But I was in shock. I went to the toilet afterwards, literally the same co-gender toilet, and just sobbed as he left and went to go back about his day. And, you know, that was such a tough time because it really cuts you to your core that you will never be more than one moment of your life. That's what he had reduced me to. That one moment of my life was all that I could ever be. And he couldn't see past that. And thankfully, we were able to raise our pre-seed. We were able to overcome, we didn't need him. And even now, as we're raising our seed, we're able to look past this one individual who's like a big fish in the small sea that is the Irish marketplace. But when you look at the change that's happening all across the world, the people who are passionate about this, whether it's, the Headstream Accelerator in Silicon Valley that's powered by Pivotal Ventures, or even Beyonce putting 6 million into this, like this world is opening up its doors to mental health, and one backwards individual isn't defining the narrative. It's us. It's people like you and me, the people listening to this podcast. It's the people who are taking life by the horns and saying, we demand more. And being called suicide girl was a really big turning point because I could have given up at that point. I really could have. I almost did because I just lost all self-belief. But, the world is defined by people who hear terrible things and just say, screw it, let's keep going.
I had a similar experience, not as drastic and outwardly discriminatory as the one you went through, but I had an investor. I went out to try to raise a venture fund in early 2019, and I had an investor, well-meaning. This was not a person being malicious like the person was to you, but this person sat me down and told me, hey, look, with your sobriety, and you haven't been sober that long at that point. I've been sober for 9 months or so. And he said, no one's going to give you money because people are going to be worried about you running off and doing something, and then they can't get their money back, or they're not going to be able to know what's going to happen. And, I don't disagree with them. I mean, he's right. Like I should have known. I should have known better than to go out and ask people to give me 10-year dated capital when I had 9 months of sobriety. But at the same time, who better to solve these problems than people who lived with them? I mean, I think that somebody who hasn't lived through what we've lived through isn't really qualified to try to build a solution or fund a solution in this space, in my opinion.
I totally agree. Do you think it's made you also more empathetic to startups and to be able to identify which ones are going to create a bigger difference because you're used to being, say, the end user of a product of, say, sobriety tracking or sobriety maintenance?
Yeah, and I'm used to seeing what works for me and what works for my friends in recovery, what works for my friends in a bipolar support group. I see the trials and the struggles that others in recovery go through, and so yeah, I'm a user. I'm a very educated end user of these products, and it's interesting because you asked, does it change my perspective towards some of the founders? Good and bad. Yes, both ways. Because when I run into a founder who has a lived experience and we share that connection, there's something special that happens. But I mean, look, I run into a lot of people in this space that are just profiteering off of the fact that mental health is a buzzword right now, and they don't actually feel the pain that I feel, and those people make me sick.
I actually think change is coming on that front as well. I think the market is getting smarter. It's so much like it's never been more accessible to understand the background of a company, and people are looking into the background of a company now more than ever. So I think, you know, the ability to profiteer off this industry is becoming less acceptable and it's becoming more widely understood which organizations are doing that. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to profiting. In fact, I'm a capitalist, and I believe that freestanding businesses that can sustain themselves with profits are how we build solutions for people who need them. So I think profit is great. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm all for profit. My only problem is when I see, maybe I poorly said this, but when I see people trying to build in the space who don't understand the problem truly, it makes me scratch my head a little bit.
But aren't they the ones that don't succeed? Like, we're looking at the mental health marketplace, and 62% of mental health apps like will never get above 1,000 monthly active users. Or like, there's so many statistics. There's 200 mental health apps added to the app store every single day, and every single day, the vast majority of them suck. And they're not designed well, and the users don't use them, and they're scratching their head as to why this has happened. And it's because they don't get it.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they won't succeed, and that's fine. One thing that this brings up for me also is there are people out there like us that have lived through these issues, and we're trying to solve for these issues and help other people, and helping other people is a large part of our own path to wellness. And what I've seen also is that the people that like the guy that approached you in the bathroom and called you suicide girl, I mean, I don't want to live in a society where, like you said, we're defined by one moment in our past when we were sick. If I have cancer and I get well, I get rid of the cancer, people celebrate me. They don't remind me of my lowest moment during chemotherapy. And if I have diabetes and I get it under control and I get my life in order and I reduce my comorbidity risk and costs, and people don't go back and remind me of how bad I was at my worst, why do we treat this disease any differently as a society?
Yeah, so this is honestly my favorite comparison to draw, because you need to look at it not even just at the extremes of mental illness. So I have physical illnesses as well as mental illnesses. So I have Crohn's disease and epilepsy. And that comparison you're drawing between experiences of people with physical illnesses versus mental illnesses, I experience every single day, where people are giving me more space when I say I'm having an epileptic episode as opposed to a borderline episode. I experience that every day. And the reason I think the stigma is so prevalent is because the stigma is prevalent not just for the mentally ill, but for the general population who experience the high and lows of mental health. When you Google the word mental, literally mental anything, you get that image of that girl, and it's dark and it's depressing, and she's curled up in a ball and she's crying. And you know what? Like, I've been her. I've been that girl crying in a corner. But when you Google anything to do with physical, you see these, gym bunnies and these buff people smiling with the color, and they're happy. And this is the reality that society, when they think of the word mental, we see that darkness. We are so nervous to engage with it. People are nervous to talk about it because they don't know what to say. They've never experienced what they believe to be mental illness. Even if they have, they just are in denial about it. And they always try to other it. So we try to say it's someone else who's gone through it, not me. It's someone else, exactly like I did until I made the attempt, basically. But this whole narrative of us versus them with mental illness, we don't experience with physical health and physical illness. We all have someone in our lives who's been physically ill. And because of that, we celebrate the success stories and we celebrate being physically healthy in a way that we don't celebrate being mentally healthy or happy. Like, why don't we value happiness in the same way as we do healthiness?
I don't know. If I had to answer that question honestly, I think it's because everybody on this planet needs some sort of help with their mental health. The diseases that we have, the mental health differences that we have, the addictions that we have are sly and cunning and baffling diseases that trick us into thinking we don't ever need help. And therefore, when we see other people getting help, we react to it very negatively because it's a threat to the thing that our subconscious is trying to protect. And so I think that's where a lot of the comments like suicide girl, a lot of the discrimination that I've experienced, I think that's where a lot of that comes from. It's from people's own fear at getting well themselves.
That doesn't explain the physical illness comparison. Like, why do we celebrate those who've survived cancer?
Because I think that on the same side of that coin, if I get cancer, I want to survive and get well and be celebrated for having gone through it and survived it. I'm a survivor. I'm a winner. I did something positive. I overcame. If I admit that I need help with my mental health, like you said, we've branded it as admitting defeat. I'm at the bottom. I'm not winning. I'm broken. Like there's this, you're right. It's just this branding and stigma around asking for help is admitting some sort of defeat in some twisted other dimension.
Yeah, that's kind of true though, isn't it? Like,
That's how it's branded.
yeah.
I mean, I think we should celebrate asking for help. I think, we should, if you're a young single person and you meet someone who's in recovery, you meet somebody who's going to therapy once a week or taking care of themselves because of something they've had to live through. To me, that should be more attractive than the person who pretends like everything's okay.
This is an area that I'm also very interested in because, we constantly talk about mental illness and look at the negatives, but I also think there are a lot of superpowers or like perceived powers to surviving a negative episode in your life or a mentally ill episode in your life.
So a lot of positive traits to all issues that people call mental illness. And there's techniques and there's treatments and there's processes and there's medications that can mitigate the downsides and allow you to still benefit from the upside. Like honestly, two of the greatest blessings in my life is that I'm an addict and that I have bipolar disorder. They almost killed me, but I'm grateful for them. And it's very hard to explain that to people.
Yeah, I think because of that perceived stigma around it, that branding issue, that people are so confused how you could be grateful for it. But I think mental illness gives us better capacity for empathy. Like, I'm so much more of an empathetic person because of my mental illnesses. I'm so much more willing to listen to others and to help them and be there for them, sometimes to my detriment. But, like, that is a power in itself. And like, I really do attribute things like that to mental illnesses and my borderline personality disorder.
Yeah. When you go into an AA room, a lot of times, people introduce themselves. Hey, I'm Steven. I'm an alcoholic. And they give their sobriety date. And a lot of the folks in my AA group introduce themselves. Instead of saying I'm an alcoholic, they say I'm a grateful alcoholic.
Oh, I love that.
And when you think about it, what I've been able to learn about how to live a different way of life, how to experience life differently, how to get the most out of life from that program. I mean, I wasted 38 years of my life in addiction with untreated bipolar disorder, but I get to live the next 40 years of my life well. That's a gift. And I have to be grateful for that.
And this is something I think we need to change the conversation around, because it's not just mentally ill people. It's people who are struggling to know how to manage stress. Like, so many people become toxic when they're stressed. And it's simply because they don't know the tools to manage their stress. Like, we learn how to manage our physical health, to go running, not to eat too much salt or sugar, to cut back on McDonald's. But we don't know the tools and techniques, the types of kind of equipment we can use to manage our stress before a deadline. And I think this is why the stigma is there, because we're not even engaging it on the day-to-day level for the general population. And I'm not talking about the mentally ill population. I'm talking about the people who aren't just in denial about mental illness because, mental illness only does affect 1 in 4. So for the 3 in 4 who do struggle with stress or low mood and can't explain why it's happening, they're also stigmatizing mental health because they're just saying, oh, I just need to sleep and get over it, or I just need to get over my sadness, or they're not even willing to tackle it on a day to day basis there.
Yeah, they're stigmatizing themselves. I mean, I feel like a lot of times we talk about stigma and we talk about how it's a verb, like I'm stigmatizing you because of something I'm saying or doing or how I think. But at the end of the day, a lot of times we're stigmatizing ourselves. That might be one of the most dangerous impacts of stigma is the impact that our own stigma on ourselves has on us.
This is it. This is the thing that I think is the most dangerous part of the stigma because, you know, that man telling me, you know, you're a stigma girl or a suicide girl, excuse me, calling me that suicide girl, you know, that was so devastating in that one moment. But actually, if you look to the 14 years before I attempted suicide, when I was self harming and doing incredibly harmful things to myself and speaking in such a cruel way to myself, they were possibly more damaging to me. And that was simply like I was active in the mental health communities, but I was in denial about it. So I think you're right. Like it's a self stigma that we're portraying to ourselves and to others unknowingly that can be the most dangerous.
What responsibility do you and I have as you as a founder, me as an investor? What are our responsibilities to write this in the startup community? How do we impact stigmatization of founders? I mean, the reason I'm asking this question is I want to make it comfortable for more founders to come to this space because we need more solutions. We need more people who get it to build in this space. And so, how do we reduce the stigma to encourage more innovation in this in the mental health space?
I think there's a lot of people in the mental health space or in the startup space who are mentally ill. Like there was a report that came out in 2019 that said, I think I'm probably going to get the figures here wrong, but it's you're twice as likely to end up in a mental institute. You're twice as likely to consider suicide. You're 6 times as likely to develop a substance abuse disorder. I believe you might be 4 times as likely to suffer from bipolar disorder. Like this is a space that attracts people who struggle like moths to a flame. And we just need to energize people on the power that they can make a change, that they can make a difference. And I think for investors like yourself, you're clearly already doing it. You're weeding out the startups that can make a difference, that can scale to become unicorns and not even unicorns, let them be zebras, but that can scale and create the biggest impact out there. And I think beyond that, we need to start educating people on practical tools that they can manage themselves on an individual basis and then work from there. It's why is sorry, why when I say to my friends that I'm feeling down, everyone goes quiet and doesn't comment. But when I say I feel unfit, everyone will have a suggestion for a fad diet or a new exercise routine that I can try. So I think we need to start normalizing it and making it accessible on the general level, and then also working with founders to create a more practical and engaged approach than what's currently there. And then from the investor perspective, to pick the right ones.
Well, I think that sums it up really well. I couldn't have said it any better. With our remaining time here, can you tell us a little bit more about KeepAppy and give us kind of an update on where you are so that people who might be ideal users of it can come away from this conversation knowing what to expect and where to find you, and then any interested investors out there can have a little bit of an insight into where you are and what you're up to.
Sure. Well, I told you pretty much the starting part of the story. And it was then I found my co-founder who's really passionate about physical health and analytics, but his uncle also passed by suicide. So the two of us really came together on this journey to make it really passionate about not necessarily the solution, but solving the problem. Like we became obsessed with figuring out the best way to equip people with tools around mental health. And that's what we did. We created a toolkit for your mental health. We describe it as the gym or the Fitbit for your mind. And we have everything from journaling to goal setting, and it's all personalized to each user based on the mood tracker. So we track the 8 vitals that most impact your daily well-being, and we would identify as the first wellness app to truly bring data to mental health. So you can find us on the App Store, Play Store, anywhere you want. We are a for-profit social enterprise. So we are capitalist as well, don't worry. But we are really passionate about creating a social impact. We partner with helplines and organizations across the world. So everyone who purchases a subscription to the app, we donate a lifetime version to someone who's struggling with their mental health. And we've been able to empower thousands of people across the globe just purely from the goodness and kindness of other subscribers' hearts. We did a lot of really cool things to ensure that our retention is pretty high. We are actually double market leaders at the minute. So that's pretty exciting. And the retention techniques that we used is gamification. So do you remember Tamagotchi?
I don't.
You missed out on the Tamagotchi craze. Oh no.
I'm not that cool. I was probably face down in a gutter somewhere during that, to be honest.
Well, this is, we're trying to figure out how to get people to keep using the wellness techniques, because it's so easy to fall off the bandwagon and start, forgetting about wellness or mental health, because it's so easy to forget it. We all want to forget it. So we decided to make it fun and to put the onus on like a little digital pet known as a keepy. So it's a little puppy that exists in the AR world. So it's very cute. But yeah, so that's kind of KeepAppy. For investors, we're looking to raise our seed round. And it's been a very exciting journey. We were selected as the only European, Asian, and Middle East, North Africa startup to participate in the Headstream Accelerator, which is backed by Pivotal Ventures and Melinda Gates. So it's been a really exciting journey. That the demo day for that is actually in a week's time or 2 weeks' time. So we're all getting very excited for that. You should check it out.
I'm definitely going to check it out. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Sure. You can get in touch through keepappy.com. It's pretty prevalent everywhere. We're KeepAppy on all the socials. So it's KeepAppy, which is kind of a cute name. And yeah, that's it.
I love it. Is there anything I missed? What should I have asked that I forgot?
Trying to think. We're pretty proud of our retention numbers. The fact that we're 30-day retention rate of between 10 and 15% when the international average is just 2.7% is kind of our big get at the minute. Like we've created a product, just two people have created a product of such a dark time in my life, and people seem to have really connected with it. They really get this. And, we're still pre-revenue, but this is a product that people are purchasing and using and loving and telling us they love. And I think the thing about the stigma, for as much as it stops you wanting to change your own life or being judgmental towards other people's lives, it can also stop you creating change. Like there's so much fear to start in the mental health world because there's so much fear around that it's overpopulated, that all the stuff has been done before, or even that your product won't be good enough. And, we're two college grads out of Ireland who have created something extraordinary and the users love it. And it really shows the potential that anything can happen. You just need to work hard enough and you'll get there.
I love it. What a great message. What a great place to end too. I'm really grateful that you spent time with me, that we connected, that you shared your story with us. I think the transparency and the vulnerability that you bring to this space is really admirable. And thank you for doing that. And thank you for being here today.
Same for you, Stephen. You're creating huge waves. The fact that some small girl from a village in Ireland heard about you shows just how much change you're creating in the ecosystem as a whole, let alone in the mental health one. So seriously, bravo to you and to all the people who are part of your fund and to everyone you've invested in. Seriously, you should be proud of yourselves.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I'm just grateful that you're out there building what you're doing and you're helping people. So thank you again for being here. This has been great.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you again, Aimee, for being here. I mean, really a special thank you for doing this. I think that this conversation is going to do a lot to reduce stigma in the startup ecosystem. It's going to make people aware of the discrimination that's taking place by other investors, by other founders, by other people in and around the startup ecosystem. I think it's going to make people aware of their own biases towards themselves and to others around mental health. So thank you so much for highlighting these points. To our listeners, thank you for being here. We really appreciate you. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you share or like or subscribe our podcast on your platform of choice. We'd love to hear from you on social media. That's on Twitter @StigmaCast, on Instagram @StigmaPodcast. You can email us info@stigmapodcast.com. And until next time, thank you for being here. Stay safe and be well.